Did you look at his picture? He looks like all our friends are here.
Yeah, we got
Really
we have an audience.
Okay, I'd like to get started if we could. Thank you all for coming. We actually adjourned or started this meeting at about 6:10 this evening and went into close, back to open. We are continuing that meeting. Starting with, we need to have approval of our minutes from our October meeting.
Move approval of the 2 sets of minutes as submitted.
Any discussion on those minutes? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. I need approval of the agenda. Any additions, first of all? Any changes? Should we mention the change?
As written, I know that there may be I know there are some folks who are speaking on our policy. If there just be consideration of moving that forward in the agenda, so that those folks, otherwise that's the last item on the agenda tonight.
Okay, so, okay.
Second.
So we are thinking of moving the agenda item concerning the holiday policy earlier and everybody is agreeable?
And
Okay.
we could maybe do that, Joan, after the spring election update, before we do the sculpture project.
Okay, sounds good. All in favor of the agenda?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Starting with some reports tonight, we have our students here who are always full of lovely pieces of information. Anaya and Sophie.
Yeah, so we have actually a lot of clubs to talk about tonight. So I'll start with mock trial. They actually are just getting their case today, which is really exciting because they were supposed to get it in like mid-October, but it ended up being postponed. So they will be getting their new case, which is basically what they make a trial over for the whole duration of their club, and they'll be getting that tonight, which means that then they can go into like planning on how they want to do the different case and how they want to manage the case in itself, which is really cool.
Okay, so I'm sorry, I have notes on my phone just in case. There's a lot of information for this month. So I'm going to start with HOSA, our health club, and they helped out with Halloween in the halls, which we kind of talked about last time. It was just a huge event, and we actually had, what, 16?
We had a ton of clubs there.
So many clubs, and a ton of kids. It was really successful this year, which was awesome. So they did that, and they just did their fall leadership conference, where you can kind of go around and listen to speakers and do health-related things and learn about all the different jobs in the health field, which is really cool. I know they've kind of pushed that into their meetings a little bit more, and they're also coming up on doing a candy drive, so people donate candy and they're going to send it overseas to the troops.
And then I have the book club, and I talked to Miss Ramsey, and she told us about their leaders who are Michael Rasmussen and Alana Hamilton. This month they're reading A Language of Thorns, which is a short story book, and this is the first short story book they've ever had at the book club. They're also really excited because they've started having more consistent meetings, which has allowed for them to have a larger number of students staying and being able to be engaged in the book club, because students then aren't like trying to remember if they need to be at a meeting today or not. So it's really convenient to have it during contact time, which again is a super thumbs up for contact time as well. So they're really excited, and they're starting their new book, and it's inclusive for all students as well.
And then we have the Young Progressives Club, and leading up to the election, they had one of the head Democrats, a woman in Wisconsin, who came in and just kind of had, I think it was during contact time, but she just allowed any kid to come who just wanted to learn how to vote, like about the voting process and what you can do, since there's a lot of the seniors who are 18 now and can participate in that, which is awesome. They also did a bake sale last week to raise money to buy hot chocolate for all the super nice crossing guards we have around the schools, because they do such a great job. They're so friendly. And then they are starting to do more monthly service projects like that, and I talked to their president, and they're not exactly sure what those projects are going to be. She was thinking another bake sale for a different cause, but just wanted to keep that going.
The Young Progressives and Young Conservatives clubs also did a lot of announcements this year about voting, so they really started to get the student body engaged and encouraged everybody, regardless of their political stance, to get out to the polls and vote, which helped kind of get the students engaged in making sure that you're being an educated voter and getting out to the polls as well. And finally, we have student council, and recently we just had our blood drive on November 7th and 8th. Our goal is to do 25 units per day to equal about 50 units, and we exceeded that goal, which is really exciting. We got 37 units the first day and 30 units the second day for a total of 60 units of blood. We had a lot of volunteers, which was really awesome, and a lot of community members came out to donate blood, which was a huge success as well.
Very
We also have, I think that's it coming up right now. We also did a little bit with Halloween in the halls, and then I think we're kind of calming down for now. We're trying to get a Chef Brian Fast Pass going, which has kind of been like on the rocks for a while, but basically what it does is allow students to skip the line at the Chef Brian line, which is basically for Wild Wing Wednesday when there's a line like into the Commons, and it allows them to jump the line and get first dibs, which is really exciting, and we're hoping that students are going to be taking advantage of that.
Awesome.
We're laminating it and hole punching it so that there's no way that people can like steal it, or like have to make sure that kids can't like steal it, or kids are like, you don't have the pass. Yeah, we were thinking about putting like pictures because we're like, this is gonna get really scary if like kids are like, you can't cut the line, and like, but I have the pass, and so we have to make it like very legit. So it's very, I guess you could say like prestige, prestige for the Chef Brian Pass. But yeah,
Very fun.
we don't have a sheet this week, but I'm fingers crossed we're gonna get it up by the end of the week. So if you guys want to take a peek at it, this
Awesome.
week, we'll have
Thank
it
you
up.
so
Wonderful.
much.
Thanks, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I need to kind of back up. I neglected to have our public comments, and I do have some people in the audience that want to speak. But if you don't mind, since we're going to move the holiday agenda item up, if we do that just before we do that agenda item, if that's all right with everybody back there. So I would like to continue on with the reports, having our teacher report update next.
Hello. So the first thing on our list to talk about tonight is the shed that we're constructing for the WNC. Like I said last month, the shed is complete. We're continuing to raise funds to cover the shed. Most recently, we have signed up to do the concessions at the high school on December 4th for a gymnastics meet and December 14th for a wrestling meet. We're hoping that puts a pretty hefty contribution into our funds for that shed. The second thing is we're currently in the midst of ratifying the ratification process. And that what was that? Recertification, excuse me. And that it goes through November 20th, so that will be wrapping up shortly.
Additionally, today we continued our negotiations process, and tomorrow we are going to continue on with that and presenting the proposal to our members. And we will welcome the feedback that they have to that proposal. And then we will obviously keep you updated on that.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Board members that might have attended any trainings or meetings or events that you would like to share with the board?
Attended the TID presentation at the Village Center that Tim Kiefer organized, and it was informative and helpful just to listen to some of the questions from some of the community members, listen to the county rep, and just share some ideas with the people there.
I took advantage of not only attending the listening sessions, which I always look forward to and enjoy, but the one at the high school was scheduled, and then there was a break and I donated blood. And I used the time in between and wandered the halls in the high school and got to poke my head in and see the use of the flexible classroom furniture being put to use in Ellen Grunder's room, and how well that's all going, so that was kind of fun. Walked by the AP Psych room, and Mr. Breinig's done a nice wall of fame with all the students that get 5 or above on the AP exams, and that was really quite impressive to see that displayed like that. And then I caught the advanced wellness, health and wellness students in the hall working on personal wellness projects, and got to chit chat and get a bit of a update from Ms. Schaefer, who's really enjoying teaching that class. And it was just a fun opportunity to wander the halls.
Good
and
use of time.
See what's going on. And the blood drive was extremely well run and efficient, and it was a good day.
Great. Anybody else have anything to share? Thank you. So we have a spring election coming up. In your packet, you have, or on your board books, you have the notice that is going out to the Waunakee Tribune. This,
It has to be before November 24th, I believe,
okay,
so I'll send it this week.
okay. And we have 3 seats that are up for election, David, Gary, and Jack's seat. And just so that you know kind of the timeline, the non-candidacy forms have to be in by December 21st at 5 o'clock. But, you know, I don't know if any of you are intending to run or not run, but I think the sooner we kind of have that information where we can kind of maybe as a board beat the pavement or whatever we have to do to get people on the ballot for spring. So, you know, whenever you want to share with us, or if you know, and you can let Rebecca know and let us know, but that's what's up this spring. Do we need to do more with that? Okay. So, we are gonna, at this point, insert the public comments, which I neglected to do. I jumped into the agenda. And I have 2 people who have given me papers to speak, starting with Nyla Fry. Welcome, Nyla, thank you.
Nyla Fry, 404 East Berlin Avenue. What brought me here is the issue pertaining to making considerations for homework and other things for the children of different faiths in the community. I feel that being inclusive and including all faiths and considering all faiths in the community is very important. And if we, accommodate one faith, we should try and do everything we can to accommodate other faiths. The other thing that comes to mind is if we have nights when we don't have homework, don't do homework assignments, how many of those nights can we have until it affects a child's education? Because I've heard information out there such as if a child misses so many days of school, it'll probably lower their grade average by a letter. So what I wonder is if they're not receiving homework so many times a year, how that affects their total grade. As a taxpayer and a grandmother, I would like to see all Waunakee students to be able to achieve the best results that they can. And I feel it's a balancing act, and I wouldn't want to be making the decision, but I just wanted to bring this information to light.
Thank you, Nyla.
Okay.
And the other person that wants to speak is Ariel Barak. Welcome.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Ariel Barak, and I want to talk about the holiday policy. My wife and I, we appreciate the time that's been spent on updating the school district's holiday policy. As I left the last board meeting, I felt a great sense of relief with the understanding that the holiday policy had passed with itemized days for Jewish and Muslim holidays. We believe both versions are an improvement on the current policy, the paragraph 1, that is brief and outdated. However, we believe a major component of an ideal policy is an acknowledgement of a set of holidays that teachers should schedule exams and major class activities around. Instructing teachers to schedule around holidays as requested on a case-by-case basis is not ideal. This will lead to additional work and efforts required for teachers with students that are non-Christian and request some accommodation. So this means, of course, multiple exams, multiple proctorings of exams, and that's, in addition to what would be necessary, right? So both versions of the policy will kind of have that as requested caveat to accommodate folks of all faiths. But if we know here in Waunakee that there are Muslim students and Jewish students already here in schools, and that kids are being kept out of class on those days to observe holidays, it's more inclusive to have those holidays already itemized and have teachers work around those than to case by case do it. That's additional workload on the teacher's end. So we strongly support an itemized calendar with these holidays for folks that have religious restrictions, Christians, Muslims, and Jews, as well as the additional language that would extend those same considerations to members of other religious groups. This isn't a question of opening the floodgates. Lots of other educational institutions, including the University of Wisconsin, have these same days off already. Other school districts do also, such as Middleton, City of Madison, et cetera. We're talking about a few days, right? We're not talking about 20 or 30 days. We're talking about 2 holidays for Islam, Eid al-Fitr and Eid al-Adha, 3 holidays for Judaism, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Passover, along with the 2 holidays for Christianity, Christmas and Easter. It is clear that many school districts in Dane County have already taken this approach. Itemizing holidays reduces the need for writing multiple versions, proctoring multiple exams, and provides clarity to both teachers, students, and their families around school district scheduling expectations. Both versions of the holiday policy mention inclusion several times. By itemizing days, more students will be included. I encourage you to think about a few of the items in the Waunakee School District mission and vision. Sustains learning environments that are challenging and attentive to the diverse learning needs of all students, respects cultural and global perspectives. We hope that the policy will pass with itemized holidays on this, the 4th time the board has discussed the holiday policy. Thank you, the Brocks.
Thank you. Those were the only 2 sheets I received, but we do have the opportunity to hear anybody's comments. At this meeting and at all our board meetings, there's always a time that people can voice concerns about agenda items. If there's anybody else in the public that would like to make any comments, you may come forward. Thank you. So at this time, we're changing the agenda order, and we're going down to the policy committee, which is at the very end of just before the consent agenda. And it was brought to our attention that last month, when we voted 3 in favor, 2 opposed, and 1 abstained, and we thought that that was a passing motion, realized that that indeed was not. So we need to first rescind that vote. Is that correct?
Yes, I mean, if we want to reconsider the vote that took place last month, the recommendation from the School Board Association's attorney, Bob Butler, was to first have a motion to rescind the vote, of which the board would vote on that, so a motion and a second and a vote, and then the motion can be then brought forward to be reconsidered with a fresh motion and a vote on that.
So moved. Second. Rescind.
So move to, so any discussion, anybody need clarification on this motion? So all in favor of rescinding what we did last month?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, great. So now we kind of have a clean slate, and again, we have the holiday policy up for consideration.
I'll just reiterate what I have in board book for the board. Rebecca and I put in the policy that you saw last month, absent all the red markups. I believe the area that we were really having consideration around was what Mr. Barak was discussing, which was really either the version of it to include the religious observance states as stated here, and then there was an or. The other version is one that does not include those and includes more of a descriptor as far as if there are observance days that a student is requesting some consideration around per some of their academics and tests, et cetera, that be the language that drives the policy. So it's really a version that has those dates listed versus one that has more of general language that just speaks to putting the onus on that student and parents to bring that consideration forward. So this was really, I think, the discussion as it was articulated the last few board meetings. So with this being brought back, I think it's really now appropriate to really, I guess, have a motion that really relates to one of these and then the vote moving forward.
Mark?
I move that we approve the language for holidays, including the itemized holidays listed for the 3 faiths.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion for the first, as it's listed in our board books, the first version, the ones with the dates, discussion on that.
That would be this one.
Any discussion? Julie?
So I am glad we're being a little more thoughtful with this. I feel like it was still somewhat rushed last time with the final wording not being given to us to kind of all go through in that one meeting. That being said, I've also appreciated during the listening sessions hearing all the thoughtful discussion that our staff is doing to try to interpret and figure out what the implications are for how we implement this policy. It is inspiring a lot of good discussion. It was nice to hear that staff is appreciating that we've done work to more clarify policy that's more respectful and inclusive. So those are all very good things. That being said, it was hard to get much of an indication, or I wasn't really left with a strong feeling for how helpful providing these dates was or wasn't, and I don't know what to do with that input. I wish we had more information in terms of actual demographics in our community to know how helpful including these dates as opposed to some other dates would be. I wish I had that information.
Mike?
I mean, I'll be brief. Same thing I said last month. I'm always in favor of having more information. However, I feel like including only 3 specific things on here is not meeting the goal of being inclusive, but is actually being exclusive. I very well know we have Hindu students in our schools. We have a family of Sikh who was moved into Waunakee recently. I don't know if the kids are going to school here yet, but they have religions as well. I'm concerned by listing out specific things we're picking winners, and that's not specifically what we're supposed to be doing. So I'm opposed to including specific religions in the itemized list. I think I made that clear last month. I really like the language that we have that's included in the other alternative option that provides for making sure that no one feels left out. I don't think we should be picking any one that is superior to anyone else, and that's what the alternative number 8 accomplishes.
Dave?
Sort of like we said before. We've already picked one, and it's already there, and it's written into our district calendar every single year. So as far as picking winners and losers, we picked one winner and everyone else is a loser. Therefore, I think being more inclusive is better.
Which one did we pick?
Christianity is already in our school calendar.
Isn't that a public holiday, the ones here?
I don't
Is
believe
Chris-
Good Friday
Christmas?
is.
Well, okay, that one date isn't.
But I think following the advice of our lawyer who specializes in education is wise, and he said this is what we should do. And following the track of every other school district that has looked at this, this is what they have done. They're not seeing some sort of weird groundswell of strange religions. Their policies have been in place for quite a while. The UW, I think if there was going to be a lawsuit, I'm sure we would have seen it by now. It's about being inclusive. It's about going as far as you can and still getting something that's workable. Putting in a nice paragraph but leaving it totally open-ended tells every single teacher, go try and figure it out with your, child in kindergarten, or a 3rd grader is gonna have to come to you and stand up for themselves and figure this out, instead of being under peer pressure to not say anything. This is simple. It's not about shutting the school down. It's not about adding so many days that you can't get tests in. We're just following what is happening in our society and what is happening in our community and what is happening in the communities around us. We're doing the same thing. We're not creating new ground here.
Mark?
I echo Dave's opinion. And when I looked at the policy, to me it's a growing entity. This is a starting point. We're trying to establish inclusivity and make things easier for our students and our staff. There's language in place that if there are other religions that also have conflicts, that there's an encouragement for them to come forward, and if there was enough, I would assume we could add to this down the road. This particular holiday setup involves 3 class days this next school year, because some of them fall on a Sunday or a Friday night, not on an actual day. And so, to me, to include students at the minimal cost to the scheduling process, it ties in with our mission, our vision about respecting the cultural values of all of our students, not just one set. And so I encourage all my board members to support this concept.
I guess I want to express that, Dave, I really do agree with you. My only concern is why these 3? If we're picking them, why just these 3? Because there are students that are not these 3 in our schools. Why are we just picking these 3? That's the question I have for everyone.
Well, the or gives outs to all. And the emphasis is to be cognitive of all. And if there's, then I would assume administration is going to emphasize that, or it is emphasized with the policy to look out for that and not do testing or projects due on those dates anyhow.
I think.
I'm encouraged because there's a way out. There's always a way for the family or the student to, which we didn't have prior, to make sure that they can take care of their need.
I guess I'd like to say, from a teaching perspective, I think having the dates just cleans it up. To expect a student to come forward and excuse himself with the peer pressure, I think that just gives the student such a disadvantage. I respect what Nyla said. We can't take multiple days off our calendar where we test and have dates due for projects. I mean, that also is very confining and difficult for a teacher, but we really only have a few dates here. We're talking 3 or 4 days in any calendar. And I just think it makes it so much cleaner for both teacher and student to have those dates down.
I think to Mike's point, we're only talking 3 dates here, but you get to see, the all the Indian holiday that was last week. You get, where do you stop? And you make that list as long as you want. And I support the or, because it is, inclusive of everybody. I think we as parents, can't expect our 3rd grader to go in to the teacher and say, I can't do this. I think, there should be communication. And I'm assuming there's a lot of communication to begin with, on this. And, if the parent comes forward and, talks to, the teacher or the team, the teaching team, they're gonna be able to adjust, their activities as far as programs and things like that.
Mark?
My concern for a student in the or section, if I'm the student of a different religion and identify my conflict, are all the tests canceled or just mine? Because now if it's just mine, I've got not only the regular class to make up, but I've also got the testing to go on. And what this does, this puts everybody on the same playing field. there are no tests that day, so no one's going to be compromised. If I have to come in and say, well, I need to take a test on a different day, that test may be on the day when I've got 3 other quizzes and other projects involved.
Julie?
But that was exactly the comment that was brought up at the high school. So anytime you take dates off the calendar, it leaves fewer dates in that particular month for all the high school teaching staff, which then does make conflicts for all the students, because then they complain that you teachers are all putting the tests on the same date now, and I have 4 tests tomorrow. So that was the other part of my concern. Anything that we're dictating days that teachers can't do certain things, I don't think that's our role to do. I think that's for teachers to know and understand their class well enough to be respectful of the students that are in there. Specifying these certain dates has the possibility of inconveniencing a great number while helping extremely few. And I know it's not purely a numbers game, because we want to be respectful. 2 people is enough, but if you're in the room, we will do our best to make room for your thoughts, beliefs, and whatever. But when you're not even in the room, what good does making room do?
I guess,
Dave first.
I'd like to respond to Mike about it's not a complete list and we're picking winners and losers. You're right, it's not a complete list. We aren't recognizing every single possible religion. But you can't let the perfect ruin the good. I mean, under the same theory, we could back this whole policy up one more level and say, you know what, we shouldn't be telling teachers what days they can and can't do things. So we need to get rid of all holidays. Which holidays are good, which ones are bad, which ones are important enough, which ones aren't important enough. Yeah, we have to make a decision. We can go from 0 to infinity. We're trying to go somewhere down the middle that does the most good for the most people. We're trying to run a community college, not a theological college or not a agnostic school. We're trying to have as much diversity and respect as much as we can. It's never going to be perfect. That doesn't mean we shouldn't do anything. We want to do one thing already and say, put it on the student and the parents to contact them and say when a test can or can't be. Well, I think we just went and segregated part of our school. We just went and said, when you sit there and say, well, the teacher can't use that day, and that would impose a burden on everyone. Well, what did we just do? We just said the student who brings it up is imposing a burden on anyone, and we just threw peer pressure right on their lap. Well, who's gonna wanna be the one who's gonna bring that up, the next time? You're not gonna wanna bring it up. At least I wouldn't have been high school. We've already picked one winner. We can either go to 0, or we can do something better than what we have today. We can make sure we're not segregating part of our school population and putting that peer pressure on them. And we can do as well as we can today. Does that mean this list is perfect? No. Does that mean it won't be modified a couple years from now? Maybe. But we have plenty of examples in Dane County where it's been working. And I don't understand why we have to pretend we're coming up and gonna create a nightmare scenario. And we have a lawyer who told us what to do, and we're gonna ignore that advice, and then we can figure out what our next nightmare scenario will be, since we ignored the person we paid to give us the best legal advice on how to handle it.
Jack?
Well, I think what we've heard earlier is there's a committee that's going to be talking about this, and I think we want to give that committee flexibility to, interpret it, and if these are the holidays, at this point, I think that committee can, come up with some rationale so you're not leaving one person out or a handful of people out or ostracizing, those people or those kids. And, I think I'd rather leave it in the hands of the teachers
you saying we should let that teacher committee decide the school board policy? I just
No,
want
I'm not saying decide the school board policy, we're giving them a direction. Our policy is giving them a direction that we want these people to come up with an action plan, tactical action plan to ensure that we're inclusive. We're setting the policy.
Okay, so.
If we, I'm sorry, but I would like to echo Dave's question. If we would vote against identifying dates, are we also willing then to go to ground zero on all religious holidays?
Yes.
Yeah.
So that we would not schedule the calendar around Good Friday or Easter Monday?
That's set by teacher recommendation. That's set through staff.
But that doesn't mean it's right. Board policy doesn't go on what teachers want, it goes on what we view as best for our community.
The board has a strong track record of accepting what that committee submits. So I do think we
So-
highly value the work of those committees.
So in the name of fair play, as a board, it would seem the only option we would have is to exclude any non-national holiday from the calendar that has a religious connotation and say, no holiday, there will be no vacation days except on these holidays, or no test days included. Right now, our calendar is set that we have off on Good Friday and Easter Monday.
Based on a staff negotiated recommendation.
But it's centered around a religious holiday.
We don't have a policy that says you have to give Easter Monday off. That's never been set by policy.
So if we, but the pragmatic is that we honor that.
Can I offer something?
Please.
Just a couple pieces, and I know, Dave, you brought up Kirk's recommendation. Kirk Strang's our attorney. When he took a look at this whole issue, when we started kind of scripting the policy together, one of the questions that the board charged us to ask was inclusion, to include or to not include the dates. His piece was really more of a practical recommendation versus a legal one, and it was based on some of the things that we talked about with regards to his was looking at it from the perspective of what he's seen in other implementations and other places where how do you want to deal with the student who brings that concern forward?
Mm-hmm.
How much notice do you need? And then how does that put the onus on the kid and the teacher? So that was his piece. His aspect as far as he wrote both of these versions. He said either one of these works, either one of them is legal, either one of them is defensible. It's really kind of practically how do you want to go about it. We've also are having an implementation committee work on this because we start to get into things about related to the curriculum and all these different aspects that we're just trying to get a better, to try and put a implementation guideline to this would be very difficult for us all to do, and we've really delegated that off to the input of our staff. So Tim Schell, Katie Grundle, and a number of staff from each of the buildings will be meeting to really start to talk about that. If the dates are included, that'll most likely be part of our conversation. If they're not included, it still might be part of the conversation. I think the piece around the calendar, I guess from my perspective, I would say that should be a conversation we have when we start to build the calendar, because I've come to the board in the past, and we haven't done this in a few years, but asked about kind of some of the things that you wanted to see. So we've had things around like the early release days. I mean, there was feedback to the board about parents, those not being parent friendly and being some challenges, so we've put some plans in place around that. If there's things we want to look at, which holidays we have school or not, I think that's a place that we should have those conversations, because there's already a lot moving around this policy. Not that it shouldn't come back here at some point, but maybe the first iteration doesn't include that, and when I do the next calendar revision, we'll have a dialogue around here of how we want to try and deal with that piece. So that's kind of my perspective on where the calendar piece fits, and just wanted to clarify kind of Kirk's recommendation. It was more on his view practically versus kind of a legal piece. But it was really kind of tied into, I think, what I've heard a few others putting is where do we put the onus with the families and with the teachers? So, and then trying to just plan ahead. But either one works from that respect legally under his viewpoint. And part of our implementation will be then dealing with the policy that we act on here, and then trying to determine what that looks like as we implement it in the classrooms with our students.
So there's a motion on the table for the policy that includes the dates, and there is a second. Any other discussion, or are we ready to vote on that? So we're voting on the policy with the dates. All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
No.
So can we just see who all the yeas and nays were, so I can, we got them all, Rebecca?
Yeah, I do.
So what do we have for,
We
We have
have
three.
three yes and 4 no. That's the way I counted it.
okay,
So no.
all right. So that,
So does that, do we need to have a motion then on the
so
second
that motion
version?
fails.
Yeah, that
So
motion.
3, 4. So now if we,
Can we make the motion to put the or, utilize
the alternative language to the dates.
alternative- I make the motion to use the alternative language.
Second.
Any other discussion?
I just want to say, I see this whole thing as an improvement on what we're doing. And to me, the objective is to all religions to give them recourse to be fair to their religion, and still the school provides an avenue for them to do their testing or to do whatever. I would hope that administratively, as we build our calendar, that we are being respectful of all and trying to avoid certain issues, certain dates anyhow. But there's multitudes of them. Somebody could come up with Halloween as one. And I just don't see where you need to make a list of which they are, and it gives an easier degree to deal with it. So I'm more comfortable with this.
Okay, any other discussion? All in favor of the second version of the holiday policy?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
So that motion passes 4-3.
That motion passes 4-3.
Okay.
Thank you again for discussion on that.
Okay.
So now we're going back in the agenda
Going back.
to, I think we're at the sculpture,
Right.
the sculpture project.
All right. For this item, what we're bringing back is the sculpture project for in front of the high school. We do have the artist, Michael Kalish, who I'm sure is waiting on the other side for us. He's in Los Angeles. So Rebecca, if you want to call Michael on the star phone, I'll wait for him to get on, and then we will do the, yeah. Is the Google map on here?
So I'm not leaving a message. Let me try
How about
one more
just hang
time.
up?
I do have it on my screen.
All right. Try one more time.
Hello, Michael.
Yes.
This is Waunakee School District Board of Education. I'm going to turn it over to Randy Gutenberg.
Yep. Hey, Michael, how are you doing?
Hey, how are you?
We're doing well. Can you hear us okay?
I got you perfectly.
All right, super. Well, we're just kicking this off. What I'm going to do, Michael, is just reorientate the board and those in attendance, and you've got quite an audience here tonight, at least bigger the ones than we normally have. So I'm just going to walk through kind of just a little bit of the background as far as the orientation to where the sculpture would be on the high school site, and just bring up your renderings. I think what the board would like from you then, once I'm complete, is for you just to kind of share what your vision is for this piece. I know I've had some questions from a few members of the board just with regards to some of the colors that are placed in your renderings. And I know that you have a process that you want to follow through in working with some of our students to kind of refine some of those pieces. So we just want to talk through some of those aspects, but I have Rebecca who's just pulled up kind of the site drawings, and I'll walk through that, then I'll turn it over to you.
Sounds good.
All right, so the place that we are talking about, just to reorientate you, we have Community Drive here, primary entrance to the high school is here, and the place that Michael is looking to put the sculpture, if you recall when he first presented it, he was really looking around the plaza area somewhere near the flagpole. When he was on site and reviewed it, he moved it to this space up front. I really like that placement of it. It puts it a little bit closer to the road, and this is going to be a project that's going to be livable by the kids so that they can interact with it, and anybody in the community can interact with it. So it's something that they can sit on, interact with, and be part of. So I think that placement works out really well given its proximity to the high school and the entrance. It also really minimizes the amount of change that we have to do to our whole plaza area. Michael also sent to us, which you found in your packets, the renderings that he has. I'll let Rebecca pull that up. There you go. And if you can just scroll through those, they're the ones that show the black and white. Yeah, there you go. Stop right there, Rebecca. So this is kind of what we're showing right now, Michael, are just the view that shows the 5 stacks of books with the students sitting on them. So Michael is looking at a multi-object piece that will be in that location. And I'm going to do a horrible job describing this, so I'm going to turn it over to Michael to really, if you can just talk through kind of what your vision is for the piece and a little bit about your materials and what you're looking to do with that site that it's located on, Michael, and anything else that you'd like to add as part of your discussion with the board. I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, perfect. Sounds great. So one of the advantages that we had in this is that I've been on site multiple times, which really allows me to really understand the space, meet with the community, most importantly, the faculty and students. And there's a lot of elements swirling around here and a lot of really wonderful layers. And I think you articulated that nicely as it relates to the student and even faculty not only interacting with Pete, but being a part of a collaborative process of this. And I know that I'm sure that was shared a bit about some quote-unquote kind of open spaces on the sculpture left for the student and faculty interaction, and we can talk about that. But basically the footprint of the piece is, after being on site multiple times, to your point, Randy, that this is a primary entrance and throughway, we want this to be a striking monument, not only for the community, the school, and the faculty, but really a destination place, and something that is sculptural, contemporary, grows with the times, and I'll speak to that in a second, but also highly interactive and functional. Students sitting in the art, in the sculpture, growing out of the books, and spreading this out into these stacks of books really enables us to have grown the footprint. My vision of this over the years is when anybody's walking through that, this area is really filled with students and faculty and parents sitting on these stacks of books, waiting around these stacks of books. And so we wanted to contain them within that one large space that is the most prominent primary entranceway, to your point, but also allows for a lot of foot traffic through the space. One of the things we didn't want to do is obstruct that view into the school, but really be kind of a wonderful entryway into that. The stacks are multi-dimensional. They're right at 4 feet, a little bit lower than 4 feet. because there are some restrictions in terms of a 4-foot structure and above. There are a lot of overhangs and cantilevers, if you will, on these stacks of books that will allow for more functional seating. Along the back on the bindings are going to be, and we're waiting for a lot of this, the element of the collaborative process of the students are naming some of these books, certain titles that we feel are representative of the school and the community. And on the other side, there is going to be an element that I'm known for of this illusion, if you will, of how these, and it's kind of a watermark in the stacks of books as it is now, but there are these kind of 5 iconic images, again, representative of Waunakee, that we feel really work well with, hey, stand here, and another layer to this monument that lines up to form different images. The colors of the books, we placed some colors in there that really can change. At the first rendering, again, was just for location, for how far the stacks are from another stack, the size as it relates to students, and we dropped in some images. But really the colors, and we have a whole bunch of colors, and again, I would love the interaction of the student and faculty of suggestions, but kind of threw in some colors in there, and certainly those can change. We can either add or delete. I know there are certain colors we want to stay away from, certain colors we want to highlight, and so again, we can make changes to those as we see fit. It's a combination material of a steel structure with aluminum elements, and then also probably one of the things that I'm most excited about is it was really the challenge of, as I'm a sculptor and work primarily in metal, aluminum, and steel, powder coated, I wanted to provide a highly functional surface area. And when I say that, I mean the tops of the stacks of these books where students can sit and they can wait. And we want to make sure that this is going to be so functional in that it's available square footage to sit on if it's 98 degrees, 110 degrees, or really cold outside. And so because of that, it's going to be a poured and treated concrete cement mold just on the stacks of the books, and then little elements in there to create details within the books. Again, that is going to be, there's going to be a element inside each stacks of books that's going to illuminate, i.e. illuminating a path. So it's going to create this really wonderful illumination through the laser cut titles of the books. And then also we can certainly talk about exterior lighting that's going to add a lot of the ambient light to catch a lot of the shadows and shapes.
Yeah.
So these are
I can pause there for a second to so I don't keep going on and address any questions so far, and then keep that.
Yeah, go ahead, Jack.
So the books are concrete?
Can you explain what your material is you're using again, Michael? I know you talked about the concrete. I believe that's just on the surface of the books. The sides of the book, I believe you had said, were another material. Can you just kind of walk through what those materials are and what the material that you foresee being really that, the surface that they're sitting upon?
Correct. So it's going to be a combination of powder-coated steel and aluminum. And when we say aluminum, if you look at the bindings of the book, and we have not added the titles just yet because we're waiting for that, again, those suggestions from students and faculty, and we will title probably not all of the books, but quite a few of the books, and then leave some of the books untitled in case we want to or when we want to add titles for the future. So this piece is continually growing. So as you see the stacks of books as they are, it's going to be a combination of stainless steel, powder-coated stainless steel, aluminum for the binding, and then the top of it is going to be a cast. We're creating a mold, a cast poured concrete that's going to then be treated with the same color and then clear coated. So basically, it's going to feel and look, just like the rest of the book, where it's going to be seamless. But it's going to, the reason for that is it's going to be much more durable. So as we looked into treating these books, and being that you have a 6 foot by 4-foot surface area to sit on. It doesn't matter how you treat steel or aluminum, powder-coated, rubber-coated, any type of park bench. If you imagine anything that's out in the elements for long enough, a few things happen. One, the temperature changes, and two, there's opportunity for damage. So what I want to do is really mitigate that damage. So the entire sides of the structures of the book, again, steel, aluminum, all powder-coated to a military-grade paint. But the top, being that it's a poured concrete, is really going to enable more students to sit and not get a change in temperature too much. Not going to be too hot, not going to be too cold. And then if there is some type of damage over time that occurs as anything that's out in the public happens, it's just much less involved than taking it apart, sanding and repowder coating or repainting that surface. So we really like that, and at first I needed to see from my team, engineers and architects, that it would seamlessly fit into the other elements, the other materials, and it completely does. So it checks a lot of boxes for us.
Nick, can I just take this moment for you to introduce Frank, so that so the board knows who Frank is, and kind of, so Nick Mishler has been really heading up and spearheading this project for the last number of years, and it's coming very close to fruition. And part of what I talked to Nick about was when it came to the installation, we wanted to be very diligent, particularly about how this was going to come together, and really not having this to be a massive project on our staff to oversee. So part of it was we needed a project manager on site that was really hired by the entity that was really funding this to help oversee it and work hand in hand with Joe. So I just wanted to let Nick introduce Frank, and we can move on to the presentation.
Well, thank you for inviting us back, and Kevin Laffey, co-chairs here, and a good number of our members also. But Frank Gore with Fogo Brothers Building is a project manager for the sculpture project. And Frank is well experienced, coast to coast, has run many projects. And let me tell you, we have our calls with Michael, Kevin, and I, and it's very organized. And the minutes we get, I wish we all could create minutes like that, but because it's just a line, boom, we're doing this, it's open, what's happening, very organized, and he's going to work with our various in-kind and other folks. We have about half a dozen folks who are going to help do this, including certainly Joe Bellamo and his staff too.
Yeah, so Frank will be working with Michael and then being a conduit with the school district, and then when this all comes to site, we'll be certainly heavily involved with this as the project management side of it. So appreciate your involvement with that.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. No, thank you for having me. And it's been a lot. It's been so much fun working with Michael and the whole team and Nick and everybody. So I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Great. Michael, if you can give a little bit of a sense of what the next steps are for you. I mean, we're bringing this to the board this evening really as part of our process to kind of approve things in stages along the way. But just to give us an idea of, we're looking to have this installed for kind of an unveiling in mid-May. Where do you see yourself as kind of the next steps that you need to engage upon so we can get kind of a sense of what approvals that the board is comfortable with tonight to give you the latitude to keep this thing moving forward?
Sure. I think a great visual for you to imagine would be a team of architects, engineers, fabricators, led by myself, all with hammers in the air, waiting to begin. It's, like an iceberg in the sense that the tip of it is articulated through these renderings, which have changed and really, again, check a lot of boxes. But there's so many things below the surface that we are eager and excited to begin. May seem like it's far away, but it's pretty much around the corner. We would love to begin the fabrication of each book and then start working with my industrial design team, and fabricators here, a couple of which you've met, to really begin the process and start, and then at the same time, simultaneously be working with the student body and faculty about suggestions of titles. So I am very particular before getting to this process, and really would have pushed that on our calls. We've had some really wonderfully collaborative calls. And I would have pushed, doing this for 24 years, certainly I've learned the process here, and would never want to put anything out that I don't feel is representative of what it is that we want to build, being that this is now, going to be a highly interactive piece. I am over the moon about, we are all over the moon about the concept. Again, a lot of things can change, like the colors and titles.
Yep.
But if you envision a bunch of designers and engineers and fabricators and artisans with hammers in the air, ready to begin, I think that's a pretty good visual of where we all are.
Where do you see, I'll get to you in a second, Jack, sorry, I have one more quick question. Where do you see in the timeline between now and May needing really a final decision on kind of the color aspects and some of those pieces? So if conceptually the board were to say that how you have it laid out here they're comfortable with, and you say that you'll be still making decisions on some of those titles and those colors, where does that fall timeline-wise?
Okay, I always like to have more time than less, but with that said, those are two elements that really we could wait on. And when I say wait, we're in November, we're going to be in fabrication hopefully in December, so January, February. I mean, January, sometime within the first few weeks of the new year, I would love to be getting suggestions on colors, if we need to add or delete, and then also some titles of books. Again, we're not going to title every book, but it would be really great, and I feel like that after meeting some incredible students and speaking to the staff, that we will have that some suggestions in place, and then we can all take a look and choose the right one. So sooner than later, but I'm not offended if this is something that is in January. Sorry, late January.
All right.
Early February.
So if we could get you, if you could get us something in time for us to discuss at our January meeting, and we gave you feedback on kind of the color pieces at that time, that fits your time frame?
Yes, it does.
All right.
I don't think it needs to be specific locations of the books and the colors. I don't know if we need to get that. I think that the idea is that, hey, let's from us receiving information, hey, we'd love to see this color pattern. This is missing. This feels too prominent. And again, this is something that I do not feel would take away from my creative integrity, and I would share that if it did. I feel like that this is something I very much want to be collaborative. The colors and the titles.
Very
so yes, I think that gives us plenty.
All right. Thank you, Michael. I know Jack's been waiting patiently here.
Two questions. Is that, are those going to be put on like a hard surface, or is it still going to be, I think that's mulch right now.
Yep. Michael, can you talk about the surface that right now it's just a mulch surface that's used for, I think it has some plants in there. What do you see as the base?
Right, so we talked about this, and I also want to be very sensitive about making sure that we are being as cost-effective as possible, even from your end. I'm very conscious of that. So we played around with the idea of, how do we place these stacks of books and at the same time allow for that passageway through, around, and what we came to was it would be the most cost-effective to pour one solid concrete or cement base that then the stacks of books will sit on, allowing for a lot of interaction and a lot of passageway through the stacks of books. We can, or you can, with our suggestions, stain that cement or color it, but to be honest with you, I feel like this piece is going to be so vibrant, so powerful that it may not need that. But the other alternative was to have individual poured concrete slabs underneath those 5 individual stacks. And to us, I feel like that it will be much more visually appealing as one solid poured surface, and also cost less and allow for more interaction again and passageway through those.
Second question, are those books connected together, or are they just sitting on top of each other? Are they movable?
Sure, of course. So it's going to be basically built, and it'll be a fairly seamless process where we will outline through Nathan Nielsen and the architect, where we need bolts, and then the stacks of books will all be connected, and they will be bolted to the cement pad, and then bolted to each other, so there's no movement at all.
Mark, I think, had a question.
I apologize if this is a naive question, but will our art students be involved in some capacity in the assemblage of this structure, or at least from seeing how something like this can come together, or what is the plan for that?
I would love that. It's going to be, again, and as I've built over the years installations, it becomes a bit, and that's, I guess, for you to dictate to us, it's a bit of a performance, and it's just incredibly interesting to watch things like this come together. I feel like if you want to select a group of art students, engineers, fabricators, aspiring design students, or whoever we identify, there is plenty of things to do and plenty of elements of this during the assembly process that we can utilize. I always love that idea that it takes a village. It really does. And if I can kind of lead this like an orchestra, and we can bring a select group of students together to help with the assembly of this and bolting, I think that'd be wonderful. I'd love to see that.
This is Nick, Michael. We've had a lot of conversation in our group. Kathy Bartling is on our committee, Kayla Proctor, Mel Trainer Burton, and certainly Randy. And so we've talked about this, and we look to have video conferencing, blogging with the students, teachers, and with Michael. We look to have, Michael is putting a video together of this whole process. We look to incorporate some of what the students will create with their video, working with Rick Braun and others to incorporate that, so that after all of this, we will have something, Michael will have something, video that we can use and educate. So yes, very, not just art students, but many others, yes.
Great. Gary.
So in that, I see some themes on these books, like a farming thing or railway stuff. Are there still gonna be themes with this along with titles? And then my second question is just, I know you're using different materials, longevity of that. I know it'll outlast me the first time, but I'd hate to see us fixing books, From that, how do you see the longevity of your structure going, or is there a point repair or anything like that?
Sure, good question. I'll address that question first. Anytime, again, that something's out in the elements, there is, over time, something that's going to change. My job is to treat that material, the best that we can to make sure that it lasts long, and at the same time, bake in the idea that if something happens, that it can easily be fixed and remedied. And we're talking about some elements, both heat and cold. So we bake that into this process. Again, the real estate on top of those stacks of books being the key point that we want to identify. I feel like we've identified and checked all those boxes. That's going to this interactive sculpture and structure is going to need very little maintenance. And if it does need maintenance, there are ways for it to come apart without the entire structure having to come apart or it being roped off or not functional. And so I really feel like that we've addressed that. And that was one of the early things, I would say top 2 or 3 things I wanted to address after this this was designed to my liking and aesthetically and functional. In terms of the icons, I feel like it's an additional added element that speaks to a lot of the point of perspective and illusion large-scale sculpture that I've built in the past. I think that if we pulled other images up, or we've referenced this certainly over the year, we've been back and forth. I have felt very lucky to have been built large-scale monuments, most notably the world's largest monument to Muhammad Ali, that was built as a tribute to Muhammad and unveiled here in LA, and that was really the kind of point of perspective sculpture. So this has a nod to that as well. I feel like it touches on a lot of things that I'm known for, and I wanted to create this, these kind of 5 iconic elements that come together from certain perspectives, where you may not notice it at first, but again, has these layers, and those speak to a lot of iconic images that I feel are representative of the community, and you'll see those, from even a light bulb, torch, symbolizing knowledge and innovation. The seed in the hand, I absolutely love that. a wheat field. Some of these are literal and on the nose, but the way that they're going to be constructed and created is really almost like a sculptural watermark embedded on top of in the sides of the books. Just again, another layer that I feel like will really add dimension and allow people to sit and stand and stay around and in it longer.
I think we should also let the board know that we're thinking of one other sculpture piece that would be elsewhere in the plaza. Could you address that, Michael?
And when you say that, are we talking about an additional book that we were speaking about, or the donor board?
Correct.
Donor
Correct.
board is what you were talking about, yep.
Right. So that's something I wanted to tackle myself as well, and I know Nathan Nielsen, who was on site, who does this as well. In fact, a large portion of his business, he does this. Very, very unique high-end signage and boards for Raytheon, SpaceX, Tesla, and so he is on my team, and we talked about some unique donor board, and what we all threw around was an open book in some location. And again, this probably can be addressed around the same time that the color choices and the titles of the books can be addressed, and that's an open book somewhere. To me, I felt like we needed to have an open book fabricated, maybe the same size as an open book as the stacks of books. And within that book, really honor those who have made this come together. And again, that's for you to dictate to us. But one of the striking things through our conversations, and you really have no idea how meaningful this is to me, is the person that's donating a few $100s. It is just so meaningful to me. And I feel like everybody who's enabled this to come together needs to be honored. There are traditional ways that we can create a donor board, and then there are some other creative ways that we can create this. So again, we feel like we want to title this installation so as people walk up to it or in through it, the title of the book, Illuminating a Path, maybe on one side of this stack of this open book, and the other side potentially laser cut or etched names of those people that enabled this to come together.
Okay. So I think it'd be fair to say, Michael, that what you're presenting for the board to look at tonight is really your structural concept and where it would be located. You need an answer by around the January timeframe, just with regards to some feedback on some color choices that we can discuss between now and then. Finalization of the titles, which some of that work you'll do with our students and our faculty, and then we'll have some concepts as far as what that donor board or donor aspect of this piece would look like, and we could bring that back in January as well. So I believe what we're really looking for from the board this evening is really approval of the concept, so you can, in your terms, kind of start putting your hammers and architects and engineers to work. And then we will be bringing back some of the details per some conversations that we'll have in the future with regards to colors, the donor board, and the titles. That be accurate?
Correct. That's very accurate.
Thank you, Michael. This is Joan Ensign. I'm the president of the board, and I'm going to bring this to a vote. But I do want to say before I do that how much I appreciate, and I think speaking from the board, the amount of detail and time and effort that you put into this, and the committee, and all the fundraising, and the perseverance that everybody has had to bring this to this where we are with it, because I think it will be a wonderful tribute, and I love that it's so interactive, and it's just a happy piece. So thank you for all that you've done and contributed to that. So with that said,
my pleasure.
I need a motion to continue this project.
Motion to continue the project is presented.
Second.
Any other discussion or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and thank you to the committee.
Yeah, there's a number of people from the committee here tonight. If you can just raise your hand if you're on the committee or here for the sculpture. Kind of gives you an idea of some of the folks who've worked on that.
Brandon, does the board know our time frame for this?
Yes, we know that will be, wanting to present it to the community in mid-May. We're looking to do that around the time frame that we do the student art show at the high school, probably the week after. Is that correct, Kathy? You've been putting all the details together. So we can still have some of that artwork potentially up, have a presentation with Mike in the PAC, and then the unveiling out on the plaza.
Right. So we look, Wednesday, May 15th is the
Yep.
day for a dedication celebration. The celebration will be more than one day.
That's right.
But we'll break ground the beginning of March.
Right.
And the infrastructure, March, April, and hope to have this there beginning of May, and
Yep.
we're ready to go.
Before the end of the school year, right in the time frame of being able to celebrate this. So, great.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for your time, Michael.
Thank you so much. Have a good evening.
You too.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, committee, for all you've done. Moving on to the strategic planning for the evening. Recruitment, support, retention of staff, compensation models by Connie.
Yeah, what Connie's going to walk through is just provide some context with regards to the compensation and recruitment pieces that we've been talking about and has had as priorities of the board over the last few years. Give you a little bit of a history of where we've been, where we are as part of recommendations tonight, and then where we're going for the future. So I'll turn it over to Connie to lead this discussion.
Okay, compensation models and structures. So this area of focus falls under staff learning supports and experiences, and specifically right under recruitment, support, and retention of staff. What I'll cover in this presentation tonight is a review of where we've been, what we've accomplished in the past, what we're asking for you to approve tonight, and then things that we're planning and hoping to accomplish in the future. You all know that evaluating compensation was established as a joint administrative school board priority during the 17-18 school year. Clearly, the purpose of evaluating how well the district compensates is to determine if our compensation is fair and competitive, and to identify where improvements are needed. And compensation is clearly tied to the board's strategic plan regarding recruitment and retention of staff. I'll touch on the different employee groups that we have in the district and a little bit about the compensation for each of those groups. So the teacher's point system has been in place for many years. In 17-18, language was added to the teacher employment guidelines to allow the teachers to be paid out for banked points at retirement. This was a change that was really well received, and it was viewed to be a real improvement to the system. As you know, the district has been using Forecast 5 to help us take a look at how we compare to other districts. So the next couple of slides show some data, and I'm going to hand it over to Steve for a minute to touch on these slides.
Thank you, Connie. In our budget process for the last couple of years, we've had a goal of presenting data to you in a format that you haven't seen before. And then we have a continued goal of continuing to update this data and track it over time so that you're able to view it over a multi-year time frame. What you see on the screen is data that was presented to you for the first time during the budget process last spring. This data is not current, so as you know, with the information being presented from our budget process earlier, much earlier in this calendar year, we just took a copy of that and shared it with you again. During the next budget process, we will update this data to show you the next year's worth of information. We're presenting this to you again so you can see, as a reminder, the type of data that we are presenting to you and will be continuing to present to you. This information really tracks a comparable set of districts where both teachers' salary and years of experience are provided together. All of the light blue marks on this particular graph are districts who work in our district. All of the other colors are teachers who work in all the other districts that we're using as comparables. We will be presenting this again sometime in February or March as we get ready for the next budget process. We you will be able to see this data on a year-over-year basis. On the next slide, if Connie could switch to the next one, the data is presented in a slightly different format. This is the second year that we presented data for you in this format, which takes the information, again, all of the teachers for all of these districts, and shows it in a slightly different manner. So we are tracking it in multiple different ways on an annual basis to be able to show it to you. And as Connie mentioned earlier, given that this is connected to the strategic plan of the school district, we want to continue to bring this to the forefront, share this information with you on an annual basis, and be able to compare it so you can see, are we moving further away from averages? Are we moving closer to averages? Or how are we performing compared to our peers on a year in, year out basis?
Question on that slide. I see Monona Grove is lower. It's hard to see what the other ones are. But is that due to tenure in the district? So do they have a younger staff?
So this particular chart is a little bit more difficult to read, Jack, because of exactly what you just pointed out. It's really hard to know how the experience changes from district to district. So while the numbers are identified, we learned with this particular set of data, it's much more difficult to compare districts to districts, which is why we introduced the data that we had on the previous slide, which takes into account both salary and years of experience, and it's much easier to visualize on the previous slide. So we still wanted to provide it to you in this manner so that you could compare it from one year to the next. But we believe the previous slide is much easier to read and visualize compared to this one, for the point that you just brought up.
Now we'll move on to some of the other employee groups. You'll probably remember that the board hired QTI to study administrative assistant compensation during the 15-16 school year. And findings from that study indicated that our compensation was below average for administrative assistants. So the board adopted QTI's recommended starting wage and midpoint wage for all administrative assistants in February of 16. And at that time, funds were allocated over 2 years to move each administrative assistant who'd worked in their position for 5 years or more to move to the midpoint, and each administrative assistant who had worked in their position for less than 5 years would be moved at least to the starting point. During the 16-17 school year, the board then hired QTI to conduct a compensation study of the remainder of the classifying staff, including paraeducators, custodial maintenance staff, and technology staff. Findings of that study indicated that compensation was below average for most of those employees as well. So in November of 2017, the board approved adopting QTI's recommended starting wages from that study for the paraeducators, custodial maintenance staff, and technology staff. In 17-18 then, the board allocated funds to move all of those employees from that study that were identified to be below where they should be. Again, moving them following in the same tracks as the administrative assistants, either to the midpoint if they had been 5 years in their position, or to the starting point if they'd been there for 5 years or less. So what resulted from implementing QTI's recommended wages was that people were placed either at the starting point or the midpoint, but it resulted in compression or minimal differentiation between people who had been in the district between 1 and 5 years of service. So they were grouped around the starting point until they hit 5 years. And we felt that it would be important to create some distance between people based on their tenure in the district for those people in years 1 to 5. So we had discussions at the HR committee, and one of the recommendations coming forward tonight for your approval is consideration of implementation of steps between years 1 and 5 of service for all these members of the classified staff that were included in the QTI studies. We believe these steps will help with retention, as employees will not have to wait 5 full years to get to that midpoint step, to get that increase beyond the CPI. Gary?
So you're doing steps, and I get that, but is there an element of usually you start an employee, the skill set isn't what's needed totally for that job? Is there, with the addition of steps, is there a certain knowledge that has to be obtained, or a certain skill set that has to be had, or is this just a seniority type increase, which?
Well, these steps being built in do not necessarily include, I mean, we're anticipating growth with every year of employment. There's this learning curve. Somebody's new, they gain skills, experience with each year of employment. But back to when the board adopted QTI's recommendation, they decided at that time that they were adopting the starting point and the midpoint, and that people would be placed at the midpoint when they had 5 years of experience in that position. There weren't other requirements to get there except 5 years of experience in the position. So what this recommendation is doing is it's just splitting it up, so it's not one big jump all at the same time. It's moving them a little bit along the way after each year of experience, so when they get to 5 years, it's not that big jump. We are having conversation then beyond that point, moving beyond average. And I think that's the piece that you're looking for is, yeah, what continuing development happens, what skills are gained to get people moving beyond that point.
Well, and or as you hire a new employee, that might be they have the skill set that fits that job at another point. It gives you a way of evaluating and maybe setting somebody higher initially if there's a skill set to be had, or a job description that fits what skills are needed for that job. That's what we talked about at some of these listening sessions and other things on how do you place people when they have a certain skill set. Also with that other graph, as you go, to move to this midpoint is great to get them to a certain level, but our current employees that are already there, now they're catching them, and we're end up having the same problem there that we had initially at the lower end, which is why we're doing this. We move this one up, and I know there's a lot to be done, but how do you distinguish between the workers? I would hope we're doing, and it sounds like we are, but I would hope we're doing something to do that, along with just seniority.
Yes, we're working on that. A couple points about these slides. The board has requested for QTI to update their numbers for us on an annual basis, and that is in an effort to keep their recommendations that came out of their study valid. Because if we just took what they gave us a few years ago and didn't move it, then we haven't accomplished what we set out to do when we hired them for the studies. So they're updating those for us on an annual basis. This slide and the next just show you examples of what these salary schedules will look like when we build in the steps between starting at the base and year 5 of employment in that same position.
So how do you come up, I'm sorry.
So the way I understand it, year 5 is the midpoint.
Yes.
And all the other steps are ways of keeping our employees to get to that midpoint, giving them about a 3% increase each year is what it looked like to me, by and large at most of the cells. And with the administrative assistant, am I right to assume that there's some potential to move from one pay grade to the next based upon skill and job opportunities?
Yeah, there would have to be an opening.
Right, right,
yes.
right.
Yeah.
Can I add something, Connie?
Yeah.
And I think it's understood, but I just want to make sure we're clarifying. Right now, what we have is we don't have a scale like this. We have this number, and we have this number.
Yeah.
So what's happening is we hire somebody today, and then, as Connie said, the board approved that we would increase the the base and the midpoint with the QTI every year. So we hire somebody today, we give them a % increase, but the whole scale gets increased. So in essence, the person who's been here a year and the brand new hire make the same thing. Until the point where this person has now worked 5 years, and then they get the move to that level. So that's usually then a large move all at one time. So what we're trying to do is create some separation between the new employee and the person who's been here 1 or 2 years, and then also even out how large that jump is once you get to the 5th year.
Check.
So basically, to your point, it's about a 3%. What did you just take the difference between year 5 and the base year divided?
Yeah, just tried to make as consistent steps as possible using QTI's base and midpoint, and just built steps in between.
Okay. And then they do get the raise, so their salary goes up. And then QTI is updating this on an annual basis, so these numbers change on an annual basis, or they stay the same depending upon what the differential is
They
between.
go up on an annual basis. Correct. The whole scale gets adjusted on an annual basis, and then people move through based on their experience.
Because of the raise that we give them, we don't automatically adjust because QTI said we should adjust.
Yes, we are.
We've been adjusting the scale per the market for that area, or for whatever the escalator is.
Yes. But what is happening is we're making sure that people are placed at the appropriate step, and we're looking at what that does for them as an individual. So for example, this year, the board will be considering a 2.75% increase for this administrative assistant group. So placing them at the step should be giving them that 2.75% increase, or slightly more, based on what QTI has told us we need to make these numbers to keep them valid. But it's not that plus a 2.75. It's getting them at the step has most likely accomplished the increase that the board has recommended or approved.
So it's not to misunderstand, so then each year the QTI is gonna give a recommendation, but then I'm assuming that will go back to HR to determine, in balance with the other work staffs, how much of that we can or cannot afford.
Yes.
It's not an automatic increase.
No, I mean, the board's asked for these numbers.
Right.
There's nothing that compels them to adopt these.
Right.
So, administrative assistant, classified staff, these are what the scales look like for custodial maintenance and technology staff. Again, just built off the numbers that came out of the QTI study. Move on now and talk about administrators. Administrator catch-up pay was implemented about 15 years ago by the board. And the way it works is an annual survey is conducted of administrator salaries in 8 Dane County districts of similar size. Those administrators whose salaries fall below the average of their peers are identified as eligible for catch-up pay. And then catch-up pay is distributed according to funds allocated by the board on an annual basis, or as approved, maybe not, it hasn't happened every year, within the total employee salary increase plan. For administrative support staff, and the employees that fall in this category include the aquatics director, COTA, Certified Occupational Therapy Assistant, Director of Facilities, nurse, psychologist, social worker, and school to career coordinator. These people, prior to this year, had not been included in a study. We did complete a study on this group and identified a few employees within that group that were below average. So the recommendations that you'll be asked to approve tonight include bringing those people up to average. And it's the same way that we did administrative salary comparisons in the past years. You've all seen this chart before, but I've included it in this presentation just because board members have been interested in seeing our history of salary increases given to the different employee groups over the past 10 years. And then we'll move on to talk about recommendations for your consideration tonight. So I'll hand it over to Steve in a minute to walk you through the budget information. But the recommendations before you tonight have been reviewed and moved forward by both the Human Resources Committee and the Budget Committee.
So what you have in front of you right now is a very exciting Excel spreadsheet, right? Who doesn't love an Excel spreadsheet? What we've used this for in the past is to try to identify for you the fiscal impact of the recommendations that are being requested for your consideration this evening. The HR committee has reviewed this as well as the budget committee. The way this is set up is really to identify, first of all, on the left-hand side, the total salaries for all of the staff members in a particular employment category, the base percentage increase that is being recommended for that group, the cost in dollars to implement that. The benefit increase means certain benefits that we have in the school district, like Wisconsin retirement system, life insurance, long-term disability, automatically increase when a salary increases. That column reflects those additional costs. The other dollar increase references increases that are not across the board. So an example, in the teacher category, it is for those who earned advancement on the point system. For the administrative, as Connie mentioned, it would be anybody who fell into the average catch-up pay as she had outlined. Admin support, we just discussed looking at that for particular individuals in that group. The administrative assistants, paraeducators, and custodial maintenance, that is the additional cost above the 2.75% to really place everyone on that schedule, that first through fifth year. So that is designed to identify for you what that additional cost or investment is to implement that schedule. Further on to the right, you'll see some additional information, how many employees are in each group, those that are eligible for that other dollar increase column, what those benefit costs are for the other dollar increase, the final salaries, and then ultimately the percentages. One thing to keep in mind is these percentages are based on just pure salary dollars only. This does not reflect anything regarding benefits. As we have done in recent years, with the changes that have taken place since Act 10, we reflect these increases in salaries only. We do not reflect benefits. That was the law prior to Act 10 to include the cost of benefits. Now it is based on salaries. So you do not see things in here like other benefit increases like dental insurance is not shown on this document as an example. But this document is really designed to try to identify for you as board members what the cost of the recommendations are that are in front of you this evening. You'll see this again later on during the action item for this evening. And I'd be happy to answer any questions anybody has on this.
David.
What does the 1183 in the bottom left corner mean?
So in the bottom left corner, what we do is we identify the 2.13%, which is the consumer price index identified by the Wisconsin Employment Relations Commission for the collectively bargained teacher agreement. When you take the 2.13%, apply it to the total teacher salaries, it generates a dollar amount that is then divided equally amongst all FTE members of the group. In prior years, what we have done is we have increased that amount equally for everyone on the salary schedule. So the 1183 increases the base wage, which then increases every other amount by an identical amount. So we identify what that amount is on that section of the spreadsheet.
I have a question, just a comment. I really appreciate how hard the HR department, committee, the various groups, I mean, this took, we've been talking about this seems like forever, but to see it come together, it's very, I'm thrilled for the staff. I think it really touches the goals we've set as a board to try to address pay equity for all our employees, and a lot of hard work went into that. So kudos to everybody involved.
Couple more comments. The spreadsheet that Steve just went over did not include the cost of benefits such as health insurance, but we wanted to note that the board did include the staff wellness clinic in the budget for the 18-19 school year, and that was a $260,000 investment that aligns also with the board's strategic plan regarding staff wellness and compensation and benefits. So to this point, then we've talked about what has happened, what we've done to get staff members to average. So where do we go from here? The work ahead looks at the different employee groups and what systems we might put in place. The teachers' point system does provide an opportunity for teachers to earn increases above and beyond the CPI by pursuing professional development. And the HR committee is interested in creating similar opportunities for other employees in other job classifications. So we have assembled an administrative assistant compensation study group, and this group will work collaboratively on developing a system similar to the point system for the administrative assistants. That system, when approved by the board, would be used as a model for building similar systems for other employee groups within the classified staff. We held our first meeting with the administrative assistants last week, and I thought it was a really good start. We've got a lot of work ahead of us, but people are happy to be part of the committee, and I think we're going to have a lot of good discussion and ideas coming forward. One thing that I've been careful to make sure they understand is that, as is the case with all new initiatives, availability of funding will be a major consideration. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Connie.
Thanks, Connie.
Moving on to administrative reports, summer school, in the middle of winter.
That's right.
Come on up,
Sheila's here to provide a report now that all the pieces are pulled together and we're post-summer and starting winter. Good
Summer
times.
year
Feeling
round,
better.
so it doesn't end. The first part is an update on where we're at. So we had a really strong turnout again for summer school. And in the report, I also let you know that since 2010, we've actually had an FTE increase of 47%, which, if you look at that column days offered, it's quite remarkable on its own. But 2010 had one more day offered than we did this past summer. It's always about the July 4th holiday and when that falls. So pretty robust. We currently offer the 471 offerings, and we hire about 300 staff, 296 last year. And that's a combination of our teachers, our paraeducators, our high school students that we hire as assistants. We had a huge deal. An audit occurred right at an interesting time for summer school last year. in 2018, auditing 2017 with a focus on our minutes of attendance, which does yield the FTE, and then our fee expenditures on consumables and other pieces. And we had no concerns from the auditors or DPI, and they do get very specific. So right down to the original receipts for materials. So we were really pleased with that. Looking ahead to this summer, kind of two big lifts for us is making sure that the two programs that we use for summer school to help us on our end of things, our human resources system as well as our registration system, are up and running and doing what they need to do. We've already been working on that, and hopefully those big lifts, we don't wait around. So I'm hoping that by the time I bring catalogs and programs to you, I can say, lifted and good to go. And we're working on that, and thanks to our IT department as well for their help with that. Something to consider, and we learned this last year, we do have one of the largest summer school programs in the state, and we also do a lot of little complicating factors through our registration site that make things interesting. One thing that we've been working on over the past 6 years is fees, because the more we can get those down to zero, the less complicated registration is, the less complicated the report to the DPI and what they're looking for from an audit point of view. DPI would like everything at zero. So working heavily on some reallocation. So I would hope that maybe in December, if there's a budget meeting that happens, just to come and talk about some of the reallocation and how I can get more of those fees down to zero. We had been going and working through that instead of a one hit all at once, so for the past 5 years, and I think we're about this close. I'm pretty excited to share that and run that by you. We'll also be removing transportation, not from summer school, but from the registration program itself, because that will help simplify that registration program. You always ask about remedial numbers, so make sure just to have it in the report up front. And I give you the comparison of the years in the data. Keep in mind when you see this, if you look at the elementary, for example, when it has 5.92% in 2018, we don't put that against swimming lessons or music or weightlifting in any of our programs, because those three are all programs that have a very different feel to them, where you come in and you sign up for a much shorter point of time, whether it's lessons or a 2-week piece in swimming or just your vocal lesson or your band lesson. So we do that a little bit differently, so it's against all the other enrichment and remedial signups. So questions you might have for me?
That's a great report. But a question I've got is, if you look at the numbers between 2014 and 2017, it looks like the numbers are relatively consistent, and you increase staff by 30. What's going on?
So a couple of different things. When you take a look at the number of students that are enrolled in 2014 at like 2511, and you go up to 2018 and you see 2609, we do a lot of different things where we maximize minutes, because your FTE of 175 is all based on minutes that we have students in the seats. So sometimes it's, how do you run the bus routes? You have your elementary, your largest population in classes the longest, because we do a single bus route versus a double run. And those kiddos are also the one that parents are going to be looking for to have coverage the longest due to their age. So it's doing some of those pieces. It's also ensuring that they're actually there for those days when we can have them for the longer periods, and getting them to attend more often. So attendance is a piece of it.
So you might have kids that stay after or a longer time in the summer school program, so you need staff to cover that? Is that
We don't count them after the programs are done, because the state is really specific on what counts as minutes of instruction. But, for example, in our K-6, we have snack time, or we have a nutrition break, whichever one it's called at the buildings. Instead of not counting those minutes, the teachers have a choice to log either an activity or a read aloud with the kids, so we were able to capture 20 minutes a day for every kid with that. So it's how you look at the formulas and how you get really smart with the analytics of those things.
Gary?
Not so much for Sheila, more for Steve probably. We pay for this by FTE. Have we ever looked at net where we're at? Are we positive by a ton or not? When you consider in transportation, administration, all the people that are hired. And I know, even though it, depending on, might not amount to much, but fees for something helps with all that. Where are we at with that?
So with the summer school program, because Sheila identifies the FTE on the left-hand column, there's two things that it impacts. One is incredibly significant, and that's state equalization aid. So even though this might sound a little strange, the taxpayers of the community honestly are the biggest winners of us having a summer school program, because adding the 175 students in significantly boosts our equalization aid. When our equalization aid is boosted in the revenue cap formula, that means the property tax levy is reduced. So if we ever ran an analysis to show you what would happen to our taxes if we stopped the summer school program, it would not be a positive picture. So having the summer school program is a very significant positive in the state funding system. Secondly, the 175 also goes into the revenue cap formula, which affects the amount of funds available to spend. So increasing the FTE, which has been accomplished in the most recent years, boosts the amount of funding that's available for the district to spend in non-summer school areas. So revenues in summer school, by the result of the FTE going up, actually benefit the entire school community by us having the funds available to spend in other areas. That's not as significant as the property tax impact and equalization aid, but it is important, and it is a part of the school funding formula. Some school districts have dropped summer school programs without fully understanding what that does to their state equalization aid formula or revenue cap formula. In the past, the school board members have asked me to run scenarios to show what that impact is. I think the most recent one that I did was a few years ago, showed the equalization impact was close to $1 million for the summer school program. So fiscally, it is significant.
I wanted to speak to the fees for a minute too. One of the things that is very clear from the DPI is any fee we charge has to be expended in a consumable way, and then they give us categories about what they consider consumable and what they don't. And so in that audit, for example, when they were looking at expenditures, it gets down to, if you ordered markers and glue for an art class, they sure better have been used up or given to the children to go. So it's an interesting, different dynamic than during our regular school year on how fees can be used and can be assigned, and it is down to the penny. It's not down to the dollar or rounding to the nickel. It's down to the penny.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, so I hope to see the budget committee in December if you have a meeting, because if I can do that, then I can finish prepping that program catalog and be to you. It's usually January or February. It's been February the past few months, so thank you very much. Thanks for your support.
Thank you.
Next, we have the 90-day outlook.
I'll just go real quickly through that. If Rebecca, you can pull it up. You can see there's quite a few things you've accomplished since we started this in October 1st. You keep going all the way down. The things that are coming up, just to kind of point out, we've already scheduled some of our committee meetings for November and December. Special meeting on November 27th, that's where we have our curriculum presentations. That is, again, we'll send that agenda out with those lists and those programs here before Thanksgiving, and it will give you really an update on some of our curricular programs that will be coming in front of you. I will be then updating the 90-day outlook for a future meeting, and it'll start to show you some things that are coming after the first of the year. That's all I need on that.
Thank you, Randy. So we have a new report.
Yep, a new
School
report.
violence drill.
Yeah, this is just really for your information. By law, we need to bring these, our drills for any of our evacuations or those type of issues that are related to really any sort of violence in the school and the drills that we have to practice. So as part of our safety grants and some of our protocols, we have needed to bring those to you. So you'll continue to see these pieces coming on as within 30 days of us holding a drill. It needs no action. It's just for your information. We need to share it with you and make you aware that these drills are taking place. We've asked the state for what format they want these reports to come in, and they haven't defined that. So this was really between the principals and Joe. That's why you have it in different formats here tonight. But it really just shows you what the drill was, kind of what they took away from it, some of their takeaways if they had any. And you'll see these as they come adjacent to our drills.
I saw the potential PR ramifications of the protocols different schools use based on what happened in Madison a couple weeks ago.
Okay.
So my only question is there a shared protocol that each of our schools pretty much follow the same dynamic, both in terms of how they set up the drill and how they communicate the drill?
Yeah, generally
to
they
avoid
do.
those kind
Yeah,
of things.
Joe's been working very closely with them. We've also been working with our local law enforcement who've been part of many of these drills. I'm not sure if they were part of all of these, Dave, but certainly that has been a part we've been trying to work on. So they've had similar kind of making sure our language is the same and some of those aspects going forward. So yes, and that's been a larger level of conversation amongst us, particularly at our admin team level. And I know that there's a number of items that Joe has that we need to bring back to our team just to make sure we're all on the same page, particularly as we look at the things that came out of the safety grants. Future board meeting, one of our strategic planning reports, we will be bringing back and share with you what has really gone into these safety grants, what have we received, and what does that mean for us? Because those have been relatively quick in succession, and as we've written them, submitted it, and received them, we think it'd be good for us to bring that back, and that is part of our strategic plan as well.
Is this something, school safety is becoming a hot topic? Do we need either policy around some of this stuff so that we have some consistency in between buildings? Or, is this a facility thing that you talk around the facility table?
Great question. It leads into an item that I have as a next agenda item that'll probably come next month. We have to have an approved safety plan for every building. So the thing that I will just be bringing to you is we are in the process of developing those, or we've had many aspects of it, but it's putting it together in the requisite format. Always the challenge of that is sharing that here in an open session, because it does lay out all the things that deal with the safety in school. So what we are looking to do next month is when we bring that forward is bring you really the index that shows you all the different components that go into that. But those pieces are certainly, and then if you want to see it, that we can find a way for you to certainly take a look at that, but wanting to be cautious of it. But that has the effect really of the policy and the directions, what we're looking for.
When you say approved, who's the approval authority?
Approval authority is the board.
Oh, so it's not approval through DPI or something?
No, this is approval. We have to, I believe what we need to do, and I'll check on this for our next meeting, I believe what we have to do is have a board-approved safety plan for our district. By school.
State thing?
State thing.
So like where you would go if you would evacuate,
It's all the stuff.
how we're going to call the parents, or
All that stuff.
So how do we approve it if we don't see it?
And that's the question, and that's the piece that we're trying to figure out, because
Is that a
I don't have a
closed
provision in closed session, I don't believe, to put that in.
That's how they proved
What's that?
Obamacare. They call them trust.
You can come up with a reason, but that's the piece we're trying to, because if you're laying out all of your evacuation plans, allow.
Should the state have set up, though, exemption or some sort of policy for how that doesn't become an open record?
That would make sense.
I know it was
I'm
discussed.
guessing there's something there.
so it probably didn't happen.
But yeah,
I'm sorry. You're right.
Between now and next month, you will see the safety plans, which really hits what Jack is asking about, is what's our protocols and what's our policies for these things, correct?
It's gonna be more expensive than mine was when I was in school, where if it was a nuclear attack, you
Hide
went
under your desk.
If it was a tornado, you went in the bathroom.
Yes, that's accurate.
It'll be
That's
bigger than
accurate.
that?
Yes,
Okay.
more extensive than that. Yes.
Because I know the state emergency plans aren't subject to open records requests.
And
This must be-
that's something that,
You would have
the
thought.
challenging part we have is there's more regulations of what we have to do and less guidance on what those need to look like. So as we ask the question, then usually the answer we're getting is, that's not developed yet. So we are in process.
But we have to have it done
So
next
we've
month.
actually, yeah, there's not this is actually what's required of us. There is no guidelines of what this needs to look like that I'm showing you this evening for our drills. But we are in compliance by sharing it with you. So the next piece is the safety plans, which we have to have approved, and I'll bring that next month with some more information and hopefully can better articulate that to you.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Any announcements?
Nope, not for tonight.
Down to committee reports, starting with budget. Any other concerns? Anybody want to talk about budget over there? Mark?
Just for the group.
I will. I think, a lot of the budget stuff this month was to cover the pay increases and the salary stuff that we did, which was all good. It was all part of studies that we did the past couple years to implement, and it's all good. The only thing I'll add to that is we also did a huge study on maintenance and equipment, and we did a huge study with Findorf to designate what needs to be done in this district, and we're woefully short. We had it came out with a report saying that we need maintenance monies of about $3 to $4 million a year to keep up with currently what we have, and we're if I had to guess a number, I'd say we're at about $1 million. Right?
I would probably say
1.3.
on an annual basis, we're putting a little less than 600,000 into Fund 41.
That's that one, but what is in Joe's maintenance budget besides? That would be.
That is primarily for non-projects, but it's
Okay,
budgeted.
so we're under $1
around-
million.
Yeah, under $1 million.
So my point being, as we went through this year and we found extra money to up our salaries, which was a good thing to do when you find stuff on a yearly basis. So this year, one of the things we continually have is when we have teacher retirees, usually we hire a teacher for less, so that's an increase in money, and we usually have increase in students that gave us, and that was $250,000 this year. So if we're saying that it's $3 million, that's 1/12 of what we need to improve that. And as we're looking for monies here and there to tackle this problem, because in our own house we would tackle it this way, I think we need to approach that as we move forward and try and figure out how to solve this maintenance problem. Because otherwise you're always solving it with referendums, and that's chasing.
I would also like an update where we're at with the energy efficiency savings initiatives and projects, and also the consolidated purchasing and supply budget stuff, which were recommendations and stuff we were collaboratively working on with suggestions from staff and so on, and I'm curious
What
what
was the
improvements.
first, I'm sorry, what was the first one? Energy
What
efficiency?
the energy savings one, because there was one about
Right.
converting light bulbs, right? To
Yeah.
LED and a bunch of
Yeah,
that kind of
and
stuff.
the second one was the consolidated purchasing.
Yeah, how we're doing with the supplies budget thing.
Supply bid. Yep. Yep, we can do that.
The other thing that we talked about as well was the wellness clinic, making sure that encouraging, the wellness, teachers continue to use that.
The whole staff.
The whole staff. Thank you.
Okay, any other thing from budget? Curriculum committee?
We reviewed several informational items, which basically are being brought back to the committee. The refined version was stuff to actually vote on Thursday. So we'll probably see the results of that after that. Right, Tim?
HR, I think we've pretty much covered everything that we discussed in HR with the salary pieces. So we're down to the pay increase and the moving those compensation models that we have heard tonight forward.
Can I have you pull up the one that has the parameters document, please, Rebecca? That'll be the easiest one to do. Yep, that one. Mark, do you have a?
I would move that we separate the administrative compensation from the package,
Oh, so you can vote. Yep.
so I can vote on the others.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Second.
Just so I can kind of reiterate the numbers so everybody is aware of what they are. First piece is we did enter into negotiations with the WTA this evening prior to the school board meeting. The allowable amount for per state law, we were able to negotiate for base wages the max of 2.13. So that is what was negotiated, and that's what our tentative agreement is recommending tonight, is a 2.13% base wage increase. You'll also see then we have things for supplemental pay, is the points. We are paying $900 for those staff who earned their points advancement for the teaching staff. You'll see that that's an overall increase then of the 3.56%. The other groups, as Steve articulated during Connie's presentation, are at 2.75% base salary increase for all non-teaching staff. We then, as Steve articulated in that presentation, we have some catch-up pay for our administrative and administrative supports. The QTI 1 through 5 year placement for classified administrative assistants, custodial maintenance staff. A goal that the board has set a few years ago was to increase the co-curricular base pay until it was at the point of being at the starting pay for our teacher scale. And we usually we've been adding $1,000 to that base each year, so we're again including that. And then just for visualization purposes, to recall that as part of the dollars that went into all of our compensation pieces, there was an aspect that did go to the wellness clinic of the $260,000. When you take a look at what funds were available, and that's excluding this number 6, because that one was already included in the first draft of the budget. So 1 through 5, the available funds, our cost of that proposal is $1,124,160. You can see the available funds, so we're just a tad under budget with regards to available funds and the recommendations we have here. So that is our recommendation. It has gone through, as Connie shared before, the HR committee and the budget committee, and is being recommended here this evening.
Motion to approve less the administrative staff.
Is there a motion on it? They were taking the thing out first?
You can just make the if Jack can make the motion to remove the administrative part of it and then act on the others.
Okay,
So we'll do
sure.
2 motions. So
Perfect.
Jack, if that's your motion.
That's my motion. Thanks.
I need a second.
Second.
Second by Gary. So we're voting on all of the salaries except the administrators. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. And now we need a motion for the administrators.
Motion to approve administrative salaries as presented.
Second.
Any discussion on the administrative salaries? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Abstention.
Oh,
Abstain.
abstention.
Yes, and Mark abstained.
Thank you. And the policy committee meeting, which was the holiday, we've already done, so we're down to consent agenda.
Motion to approve the consent agenda as written.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Second?
Couple comments. First of all, on the monthly finance reports, I want to acknowledge and thank Steve for including several new line items on the basic budget page. We now see a separated outline for the wellness clinic that includes the amount of money that we've set aside and then how we're drawing down on that budgeted piece and several other categories, and I think this is an improvement and provides clarity. And I thank you for that. And second, on the wellness committee, the wellness clinic update. Going through that, 2 slides stuck out to me. One was the one that articulated, it's page 18 of 22 in the report, the update that we got from Dean quit as of March 20th of 2018. So I'm always concerned why that lags so far behind in their reporting in terms of medical expenses and costs we paid out, as opposed to, I mean, it's November. We think we could catch up a little bit better than that. They've also started including a slide which shows fill rate, which again, I think is gonna help us better keep track of how our employees are actually utilizing the clinic. And I'm glad we're continuing to monitor that. I still can't help but feel the actual visit numbers are not to what we had said was our break-even point. So, glad we're monitoring it. Thanks for those 2 things.
Can I
Any
just
other?
make one point? One of the things coming back to the budget committee, what we did do is really start talking about how do we potentially bring other groups within our district into helping us
With the wellness clinic.
with the
Possibly
wellness.
that you,
Sure.
we had a discussion about it, that you maybe help include the employees from the village as an example. To use that and help pay for it and.
Town of Springfield,
Right.
just, the town of Westport, groups within our school district that could potentially.
Mark?
And I'd just like to point out too, though, that, if we didn't have the health clinic, the likelihood of a 0 increase in health costs for 5 years wouldn't have happened. A 3% increase would have been $200,000. A 5% increase, which wouldn't be out of the ballpark, would have been $340,000 compared to $260,000. So, I mean, there are some cost savings, despite the fact that our numbers might not be breaking even in terms of the overall healthcare package. And so, need to continue to monitor, but there are a lot of benefits we're getting that sometimes I think we lose sight of.
That's true, but there's a freeze on it, because they're trying it with us, I think, too. Where that could end up at the end, I don't know. It still comes down to,
Probably our case, how
Right,
much,
it
how
still
many
comes down to your
claims.
case and
If we
claims
keep the
versus.
claims down,
Right.
because we're doing this,
Right.
we're gonna be happy.
Which is where we hopefully do it. I did hear one thing, in the listening sessions, or as we talked about that, how to get people involved. Some people feel that this came from us because we were trying to look for a way to help our insurance, and I think it probably came from the committee too. And maybe we didn't approach the teachers and staff ahead of time to say, is this something you would use and do? We shoved it at them versus bringing them with it. That was an interesting perspective.
Again, I certainly don't mean to suggest we should not be doing it. I'm just glad we're continuing to monitor, and it's important that we continue to hear from staff whether it's truly a benefit to them that they value, because if they don't value it, what are we accomplishing?
Gary?
One other comment on the consent agenda, and that's, I don't know where we fit in this. We've had this discussion over and over, but trips and whatever, and where we limit some groups and don't limit others, and that we're stamping our approval on these things. And I still will say that it puts some parents in a position of feeling they have to go with their child if they're involved in the group, and we have somebody going to, our band this year, I think, wants to go to New Orleans. And we've got sporting teams that wanna go here and there, and then we have rules that say they can't go to Florida, which New Orleans, Florida, and I don't know, it's kinda close. I just, and overseas and everywhere else. So I don't know our role in, that we're stamping these saying they can do that, or do we even not get involved in it, something outside of our, I know there's insurance and coverage and stuff, but we've had long discussions on this. I say they ought to go wherever, but.
Yeah, and that item I'm gonna bring back to the next policy committee to review that policy
Good.
again. And I have another group that is out that as a would like to travel, per the policy aren't allowed to, and would like to appeal that to this body. So I think that's a piece we may hear at the policy committee once we get there. But I think this policy needs to come back because we have lots of conversations every month that we have travel. So I think it's time that we kind of bring some consensus around that.
Well, and do we have to approve of a request for a trip that's already supported by existing board policy? Or does that existing policy, in essence, give our approval for the trip?
I believe out of state travel requires approval of the board, period. That's in policy. It used to be any overnight had to be approved by the board.
I thought it was within certain months, so that contingents with Illinois or Iowa
No, there's different pieces. So the
Okay.
policy is written that anything in-state overnight I can approve.
Okay.
Any travel outside of the state that has an overnight aspect to it has to come to the board for approval.
Got it.
And it says for athletic competitions, it has to be within bordering states. So that's what.
So even though it's there, we still have to approve by policy?
Correct, even though
Got
it's,
it.
so even if you go to Iowa, the soccer goes there, volleyball went to Illinois, that's why those have come here.
Got
It
it.
also states that band is able to travel for the cultural experience. And they can so we've had band and musical groups that have gone to, well, in the
Several
US, they've been to
places.
Canada, they've been to Ireland. So I mean, those are the pieces that I think we have to kind of come back to,
Right.
policy-wise, and kind of review of where those would fall.
It is interesting to note that with the band trip, I do think they heard some of our concerns expressed from before. They have not done a spring band trip since 2015, so now this will be 2019. And I think the goal was
Once
one
every
trip
4
during
years.
your high school years. The
Right.
opportunity for one trip,
So
so they're
What
trying to do that.
What we can bring back, and I believe I have in my office, is kind of the schedule, at least kind of rotational of when different groups travel. So we bring those pieces back.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve the whole consent agenda. If there's no other discussion, anybody else have anything to add?
I just appreciate that the band trip actually took the time to put together an actual itinerary to tell the board what's going on. It was longer than the one paragraph we got for the last one that we were asked to approve. So the consideration of that is appreciated.
Anything else? All in favor? of the
Aye.
consent?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Board business, convention workshops? State convention already.
State convention's coming up, so if those, I know, Rebecca, you have early bird registration.
If I can if I can know by the next board meeting, I can make early bird registration. So look things over, let me know.
What is it this year?
January, I don't have it written down.
23rd to the
23rd.
25th.
Oh, January 23rd and 25th. Apparently I do have it written down
January
here.
23rd to the 25th.
Yeah, we mentioned the school perception.
School perceptions we did during board development.
That was in the folders.
Good.
Pull that out.
Those are due June 30th.
Just for you, Jeff. Any legislative
Not
updates,
tonight.
correspondence? We've already
We already did it,
set,
yep.
I think we're ready to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
I'm just gonna make somebody else. Yeah, I didn't either.
Yes.